The Shadowdark Kickstarter is going live on February 28th, 2023, so mark your calendars, you're not going to want to miss it. Alright, so the first reason you want to play Shadowdark RPG is because it's awesome. The second reason is Shadowdark includes rules for beginning your campaign at level 0. Shadowdark formally calls this
the Gauntlet.
Instead of starting off at first level with an adventuring class, you begin as a vulnerable level 0 peasant. In fact, you begin with 4 vulnerable level 0 peasants. You then take your squad of 4 peasants and run them through a well-established dungeon full of brutal traps, monsters, and of course, tons of treasure. This is a great opportunity to get familiar with the basic mechanics as well as the concept of death. A good strategy is to use your other 3 peasants to try to keep your favorite one alive, or be like me and foolishly try to save them all. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to make a separate video on this topic and share how I'd make a gauntlet. Next up, character creation is quick and easy. Your ancestry grants you your languages and 1 ability. That's it. None of this, you get proficiency in this type of armor, you have a +2 in strength, you have dork vision, resistance to fire damage, no days off, remaining focused. You can cast this spell because of your bloodline or something, and you have advantage on eating pizza. Like, you can do it really well. Like, really well. Just, no. You have 1 ability and 1 or 2 languages. Sorry, halflings, you only get 1 language because you can, like, turn invisible at level 0, so chill. The class abilities are pretty straightforward too, and aside from talents, your real progression comes from gaining hit points and finding magic items. This level of simplicity with class abilities keeps the game moving instead of spending like 20 minutes trying to explain to your players how wild shape works. Another interesting benefit of this is how easy it is to create custom or homebrew classes for Shadowdark. Now, some people might not like this next one, but to me, it's a win. Modifiers are not added to damage. If you have a +4 in strength and you hit an orc with your longsword, you're only rolling the damage for that longsword. You don't add anything else to that roll unless you have a class ability like the fighter's weapon mastery or some other talent roll. This helps speed combat along by keeping more complex derivative math to a minimum. The Shadowdark rule set gives you just about everything you need to roll up a new character in a couple minutes. Because Shadowdark is OSR-adjacent, going on adventures and exploring dungeons can prove to be quite lethal, and thus it's really important that your players can roll up a new character in mere moments and jump back into the game should their character experience a warrior's death. I mentioned this in my last Shadowdark video, which you can check out here, but Shadowdark has one of the coolest and most intuitive light tracking systems that I have ever experienced in an RPG. No player characters have dark vision, and all abilities, spells, and magic items were carefully designed to not break the light system. You'll notice that 1 torch takes up an entire inventory slot. Whoa, why? Well, each torch burns for 1 hour of real time. So if you light a torch, you can pull out your phone, set a timer for 1 hour, and then carry on. This does wonders for adding a bit of urgency to decision making at your table because you have a real life timer ticking down until the darkness returns. And once the lights go out, things get deadly. I have a story to share with you about a super cool moment that happened during my recent Shadowdark campaign. It's a true story from one of my playtest groups, so stick around until the end of the video if you want to hear that. So what do you do with all of that gold? Managing gold economy in tabletop RPGs can be a little tricky. In Shadowdark, one of the best ways to spend all of your hard-earned coin is by carousing. To do this, all party members who participate pitch in for a carousing event. The more gold you pitch in, the higher the bonus you receive. If, for example, you all pitch in for a total of 30 gold, well, you're buying a worthy night of drinking and festivity and receive no additional bonus. But if you each pitch in to raise a total of, say, 600 gold, well, now we're talking about a 3-day voyage into the finest food, drink, and gambling, which gives you all a +3 bonus. Once you decide on your carousing event, each participant rolls a d8 plus your event bonus. The higher you roll, the more experience you earn towards leveling up. You might also gain an item, an ally, or even a favor. I love this because it directly converts your coin into advancement, and it acts as a solid drain on resources, which ultimately pushes your PCs to find the next dungeon to explore. The carousing mechanics in Shadowdark are, to put it lightly, sick. Next up, there are lots of tables in Shadowdark, and by lots, I mean many. Everything from rumors your PCs might hear at a local tavern to full-on adventures. There's even a table that helps you create an NPC's name by rolling for their prefix, syllables, and suffix. It's great. The list goes on, but my favorite is the section that helps you create a randomized dungeon map using a handful of D10s. If you watch my recent video on 5 torches deep using the Rubik's Cube model, this is my invisible Rubik's Cube that I've successfully solved, you'll know that I really like clever and unique ways for designing a dungeon. But this is a really fun way to get the creativity flowing if you occasionally get stuck like me. Now, aside from a complete bestiary on Shadowdark monsters, there's also an entire section on generating your own unique monsters. You can determine the monster's armor class, strengths, weaknesses, their attack bonus and damage, and it even gives you some mutation ideas to spice up your horrible creations. Pick and choose or roll them randomly. More dice for the dice gods. Now, I'm honestly a little embarrassed about how much time I dumped into making monster stat blocks back when all I did was play 5th edition D&D. They were such a ridiculous time sink. For some reason, I felt that writing them out in shorthand would help me run them more efficiently at the table. This was partially true. I think the bigger piece was that 5e stat blocks just had so much unnecessary fluff that it made it really difficult for me to incorporate all of their abilities at the table. I would just forget. I found myself post-combat saying things like, "Ah, shoot, I forgot to use monster's X ability," or "Dang it, I forgot that this monster was vulnerable to Y." Because of the rules-light nature of Shadowdark, the monster stat blocks are also simplified. Now, this shorthand might not be best for everyone, but it really helped me to not be bogged down by all of the abilities and skills that monsters have during combat, so I can almost better focus on my improv skills at the table. And lastly, while I'm personally trying to be better about not opening source books at the table, other games like Index Card RPG and Old School Essentials do a really good job of utilizing the inside covers, both the front and the back, for super useful information that would be nice to have on hand during your game. The authors of those books get it, and I'm super happy to share that Shadowdark is the same. To be fair, Index Card RPG has a giant map of the Doom Vault, but that's still really freaking cool. The inside covers in Shadowdark aren't wasted, and that makes me very happy. And for all you Darklings out there, I think you'll also be pleasantly surprised. Can I say Darklings? Are we Darklings? Is that canon? Did we decide on that? Now, before I tell you that story, I do want to share that I'm working on a document with a bunch of additional Shadowdark compatible classes. It's not quite done yet, but when it is, it will be available to all of my patrons first. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you're interested in becoming a House Guild member, you can find a link to that in the video notes. So with all that said, here's the story why I love the light system in Shadowdark. So I have this beautiful group of friends who were kind enough to help me test out these additional classes for Shadowdark. The majority of the group had experience with playing tabletop RPGs, as well as some outdoor education LARP camps that we ran, but one person didn't. I wanted this to be a fairly simple and straightforward first session, mainly because this is a completely brand new system, but also to kind of gauge how a brand new adult player picks up the rules, having had no experience with anything like D&D. So we sat down, we grabbed some snacks and some drinks, and we each rolled up 2 level 0 characters, and then we dove into the adventure. We only rolled 2 characters because I was trying to be mindful of time. Once the party arrived at the dungeon site, it was after dark, so naturally the torches came out. After they entered, they explored some hallways, made a couple checks, opened some doors. I rolled a couple random encounter checks, but just kept getting nothing. And they came into this dark room that had a bunch of old, dilapidated barrels. The south wall was broken open, and cautiously they're all moving inside this room. And half the party busied themselves with whatever loot they find in these crates and barrels, while the other half was just looking into the darkness of this gaping hole. Torchlight up, extending as far as they can, and the torchlight just goes off, and then darkness takes over. I told them aside from a cold, musty breeze that they just couldn't see anything. I let them check a few things and kind of continue on before deciding to roll another encounter check. This time I got a 1, and the monsters were close. 3 large spiders came thundering from this gaping hole from the darkness and attacked the party. Roll for initiative. The party fought these creatures while sort of doing a fighting retreat back through the original door that they came into. And remember, each player has 2 level 0 characters, so total there was about 8 PCs in this room. It was epic. I was pretty sure that a party of this size would do fine until after round 2. They passed the turn and then I declared, all right, it's the spider's turn. And then suddenly my timer goes off, interrupting the combat. There's a pause at the table because all attention was drawn to the sound. I tried to remember why I sent that timer, and I looked at my friends and they all looked at me with like concerned looks on their faces. And I was like, oh shit. Oh no, this is going to be really bad. And that's when it dawned on me. So I looked up at everybody and I was just like, with grim confidence, suddenly your torch sputters and goes out, engulfing you all in darkness. And now the spider is going to take their turn. The look of terror and excitement on my friends' faces was so good. My players were hooked. And this was like the first dungeon in this like sort of mini campaign that we had just started. The stakes are real in Shadowdark, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did with my friends. Let me know in the comments if you plan on giving Shadowdark a try. And again, thank you so much for watching. Praise Memnon, and welcome to the Shadowdark.